Hello out there, and welcome to this special extra scruffy edition of the Metagame. The extra scruffy edition brought to you by Not Fully Unpacking from BGGcon yet. I am your host, as always, Chaz Marler, but I'm not going to be alone because the whole purpose of the Metagame is this is the live streaming show where we talk about board games and sometimes talk about talking about board games, hence the meta version of the Metagame. And I am joined, as always, by the live streaming YouTube chat, which you cannot see because there's not enough room here in the studio to fit it all. So what we do is we keep everyone that's chatting on the YouTube stream out in their own separate houses, and they contribute via the typing in what they want to say. And if you are watching in the YouTube live stream and you have something that you want to say, a question or a response or something that you want to have included for consideration on today's show, be sure to type it into the YouTube live chat area as we're going along, and be sure to add the hashtag TMG for the metagame. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between my own statement and the YouTube chat, and we're going to have a good discussion, and you're welcome to join. So today is Black Friday, so I really wasn't sure how many people were actually going to be around present in the chat. So I'm keeping today's program really, really loose. And so I have our topic of discussion, but if our topic strays off into left field, I'm not going to mind as much. We're just going to see where this goes. So that means I also welcome your general Q&A questions this time. That's why I had that included in the title of today's episode. Just due to the possibly different audience that we have going on with Black Friday and everything, I just thought, let's just do some Q&A as well, and we'll just go from there. And I brought my bird marks. A bird bit me on the neck this morning, so I got my bird damage and my scruffiness, so I'm about as prepared for this as I think I'm going to get this morning. All right, so let's... Wow, there was a bunch of dropped frames there. I'm going to go over here and check something real quick. Wow. I'm getting reports that there's quite a bit of lag going on here. Hang on a second. So we're going to trudge through, and hopefully the lag will resolve itself. But I'm going to write one note. Not sure what's causing that lag. Because let's see here. Yeah, we had a bunch of dropped frames there for a moment. I'm not sure what caused that. I apologize. But hopefully it's back on track, and let's continue on with our program. So what I did is I took the approach this time of posting today's question not only in the chat area, but also on the BoardGameGeek forums over on BoardGameGeek, the Dice Tower forums over on BoardGameGeek. See here, I made a little topic called "How far would you hike for a meeple?" And I asked people to answer the question of how far they would go for conventions and other board gaming events like that. And got a few responses. Also got someone posting that they would walk 500 miles. So one of thanks for doing that. You got that song stuck in my head all week. So thank you very much, Brandon, for taking the time to get that earworm buried deeply into my dome. But we also have a few other answers from here. So let's actually just pop over there real quick, because I want to hear what some of the people had to say about their own meeple hikes and how far they would go. And this might also help supplement and give some ideas to the live streaming chat that we got going on as well. So let's just go in here. I'm not sure how in-depth these people are going to go, but we have Peter here at the top who mentions that they'd love to hit BGGcon at some point. And he mentions, though, even though moving to downtown Dallas that's less enticing to him because the airport is relatively close, but I have a lot of family things going on, and that means the convention is less of a priority. And actually, I want to pop over on that real quick because, yes, BGGcon was just last week. And BGGcon, which is the board gaming convention that's hosted by the makers of the BoardGameGeek.com website, is always the week before Thanksgiving. And it's up to this point, it's been hosted in a hotel, really nice hotel for it. But it's literally across the street from the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. And so it makes it, in that way, if you're traveling from out of state, it makes it really, really convenient to get to. However, it's at the point where it's just about grown out of that size area. It's getting a little too big for its britches there at that airport. And I believe in 2019 or 2020, I believe that BoardGameGeek Con will be moving to a different, larger venue, probably somewhere else in Texas. So if you are making plans to go to BGGcon, and it being that close to the airport was part of one of the reasons due to the lack of additional travel, that might be something to check out going into. I'm assuming, though, that even after they move, that BGGcon is still going to be taking place the week before Thanksgiving. And that, to be honest, that's always struck me as a strange time to have it because there's so much other family prep stuff that seems to be going on that week. It seems to me it can be a bit of a burden having it the week before Thanksgiving. But that's when they have it. And the attendance, I think it's a few thousand people, between 2,000 to 3,000 people. So that's the size of this convention. It's not as large as some of the other conventions that we have going on. Origins is like 16,000 attendees. Gen Con is 60,000 attendees. And Dice Tower Con, which is another growing one, has grown from like 1,500 to going to be larger than BGGcon this coming year, like 3,500, I think. And it's going to continue growing from there. So there are several conventions that are quite large in size, and others that are growing, and some that would grow more if they had enough space to do it. And in a couple of years, we'll be moving to larger spaces so they can continue to grow. It's going to be interesting to see just how large these conventions can grow, how much of the board gaming community is willing to travel to these conventions, and what is the cap? What's the max size that they can get to? How many? And there's so many of them. How many conventions can the board gaming community support? Are we going to hit a point where, with so many things, they grow to a certain point where several large ones eclipse the smaller ones, and the smaller ones fade away, and we're left with only a half dozen large, but that's all there is, type of conventions throughout the year? That's kind of one of the questions that was going through my own mind when I created the topic for today's episode. So actually, let's check in with the chat actually now, and let's go see what people are saying. Let me grab my little search bar, and let's get acquainted with today's chatarians, chatterati, chat nation. I'm not sure. Whatever the chat people are, let's find out. We got currently 9 comments here, and we will start as usual, as we usually do. The first comment today comes from frequent, if not perpetual, online viewer and friend of the show, Kabuki Kid. And Kabuki mentions that personally, she says, I hate traveling. Aha. So shorter the trip, the better for me. I have yet to go to a proper con. So I'm not sure how far we'd be willing to go, but I currently have only had to drive about an hour or so to friend's house to game. I'm going to something of a house con this weekend with 50 plus people. Wow, 50 people in one person's house con? But it's only like 10 minutes away from me. So lucky me, says Kabuki Kid. That's 50 people at an in-home con. That's a very interesting, that's a huge number of people there getting together. It's at someone's house. I think the max would be like 20 or so, but that's great. And that's one thing that a lot of well, it doesn't get a lot of talk usually, it seems, is in-house cons. People just having people over to their own house and these large board gaming house parties. I'm wondering how much traction that will gain, and maybe we'll see in the chat if that's the norm, or if other people are doing that or not, and how much of the norm it is. All right, I see someone asking how in the world a house could hold 50 people. That's my question there. All right, let's continue on to the next person who wanted to comment on the show here, which is Tamara, who looks to be a first-time commenter, so that's excellent. And Tamara is going to ask us one of our general questions here. So, excellent. We're going to pop back and forth here, and our first pop forth is going to be Tamara, who asks, "What, dearest Chaz," and I just added that part, "dearest Chaz, what do you think about other board game podcasts and shows? For example, Shut Up and Sit Down, Shut Up and Sit Down, or Bored with Life?" And I really remind myself that there is no editing in a live stream. So, what do I think of other board game podcasts and shows? I think that there is an incredible amount of talent, and I'm shocked how many there are, to be honest. If you go to the website, one that I frequent called BoardGameLinks.com, they have a page that just lists all of the podcasts just that they know about, that they've added to their database, all of the YouTubers and media makers about board games. And there's over 400 people on that list. So it seems like every week there's another 2 or 3 people that we stumble onto. One, I can't remember the name of it, unfortunately. Oh, no. Board Game Boards, offshoot of Lone Shark YouTube channel, I think. They just started publishing some YouTube reviews, and they have an excellent mix of information and humor in theirs, and quite frankly, and really nice technical graphics and stuff like that. Quite frankly, they make me quite jealous. And when I stumbled onto them, but they were quite enjoyable. And that was, I think, Lone Shark was the name of the YouTube channel, and their series was Board Game Board, I think, something like that. And they're popping up all the time. But as for specifics, I always enjoy seeing more people entering the hobby and creating media, because everybody has this different take on it. And so it's really nice, I think, to have a large community of different voices. Shut Up and Sit Down are, they've been doing this for quite a while, and they have, really earned their audience that they have. And they are really nice guys too. They've been at a couple of the conventions that I've been to, and we've crossed paths a couple of times just for a couple of seconds and said hi. So it's been it's nice to see them involved on the convention side of things too, talking to other media makers and publishers. And it's always nice when some of the content creators can get to the point where they can do that. That's not a requirement though. If you want to make media and board game content, don't think that you have to jump in and plunge all the way into the deep end. And don't think you say, oh man, now I got to start going to Gen Con, and now I got to start interviewing all these publishers, and now I got to start doing all this other stuff. No, I don't agree with that mentality. I think that if you want to make board game content, all you need is your way to record it and your place to post it. And if you have passion for what you're doing, and you're doing it out of the passion of creating content, then that will show in the content that you create. And also that will show the contribution that you make to the board gaming community will just come naturally out of that, based on the passion for the industry and the games and everything. So getting back to the original question here, which scrolled and jumped, Tamara asked, what do you think about other board game podcasts and shows? Hopefully that answers the question. I'm always excited to see new ones coming out, and I'm always interested to see the different take and slant that they take on the media that they create. Some of them are more of a narrative, and some of them are just more standard reviews, and a lot of them are starting to mix that together, which is really cool to see. Alrighty. Let me know in the comments below what your guys' favorite board game media sites and stuff are. like I said, there's so many cropping up. There's always some that people had never heard of. So it's a good way to share a list of the other ones that are out there that we might not have heard of yet. All right, but don't post links to your own. Don't. That's spammy, and that is shameful, and will mock you if you post your own. So don't post your own because the mocking. So, all right, let's continue on to Eva, who mentions. Eva mentions, I am ready to go to the moon, but can't afford it. Boy, tell me about it, Eva. If my plans could come to fruition, my home base would be for the media content creation would be on the moon. I think I've mentioned in past items, it's one of my master plans is to conquer the moon and turn it into a media content creation hub. But hasn't happened so far with all the pesky space travel and stuff. But make your deal. If I do find a way to make it to that moon, I will send you an invite, and we'll get you a small cottage or something there, and we'll make sure that your moon plans come to fruition. So you can put that in your memory banks, and we'll come back to that when the time comes to conquer that moon, because I'm sure it's only a matter of time. Also a matter of time is the next question. So let's go to Toyota, who mentions getting back to traveling for games, which is a question that appears he's given quite some thought to, because Toyota writes, and that's 2 M's worth. Okay, so travel for games. Would it depend on the type of event and the cost involved? Oh, which is a good point I wanted to mention. Honestly, if it were free, I'd go anywhere to any con. As for regular gaming, I usually host or just go to the local cafe. Point about travel. I am in a fortunate position where I've gone to many of the conventions I've gone to at this point. I've actually gone to as a member of the teams for either the Dice Tower, which has been awesome, or Passport Game Studios, which has also been awesome. And when you're going as part of a larger company actually working the convention for them, of course, typically it's like work for hire, so they help cover a large portion of your travel and lodging expenses. Of course, that varies, but it depends how much you're working for them and what situation you're in. But if that was not the case, if a portion of the travel expenses couldn't be subsidized, I know I would not be able to go to as many conventions as I have. It's really been what's made it possible to do. So if you get yourself in a position where you can be working with a company that does help subsidize the expenses, I say, jump on it if you can. And then when you get to the convention, work your tail off for them as much as possible to make yourself as indispensable to them as possible. And, if you become a very valuable player to the team, it can lead to being invited again in the future to other conventions, which can be really helpful to the company, and because companies are also always needing more work and for demoing and doing other work and stuff like that. And it can also be a way to help get to some of these conventions that would otherwise be outside of your range. And usually before conventions, a lot of these companies put out, sometimes they'll put out kind of questionnaires or something, surveys or something for people asking if there's anyone out there in the area that wants to come partake in the convention. And sometimes they can't pay anything other than giving you a badge, but even that is something. So it depends on your proximity to the conventions too. But I'd say before... Oh, wonderful. Before going to the conventions and stuff, they usually post these up. And I just wanted to mention that the wonderful companion to our show, Windows operating system, has just made a pop-up to inform me that it really wants to restart right now to install a software update. Thank you, Windows 10. So if all of a sudden I disappear and the live stream goes dead today, it's because Windows has decided it's run out of patience with me and has decided to restart my computer without my permission. So this might be a cliffhanger episode that ends abruptly. Hopefully not, though. Thank you, Windows. You always make the show interesting. You come up with new, intriguing ways to just keep me on my toes. All right, let's go back to Tamara, who has another general question, which we'll answer. Have you played the Game of Thrones? And if so, what is the tip for the first-time players? Oh, I have not actually played the Game of Thrones game. It's a little difficult for me to get some of the larger, longer games to the table oftentimes. Oftentimes I'll play with my family, and so we'll play more of the family games. And at our board game conventions or local game days and such, typically I defer to what other people bring with them, and there's usually someone that has something new that they want to try. So my experience has always been usually lots of newer stuff. Though I would love to play the Game of Thrones board game because I think that the amount of area control and potential of diplomacy and backstabbery that it includes would be something I'd probably fail miserably at, but enjoy while I'm failing at it. So, unfortunately, I don't have any tips for the first-time player available for that yet, other than possibly the tip of, if you know you're going to play this game, it's such a big, long, complex game, I guess my only tip at the moment would be to do some research on the game before you play it for the first time. It seems like this is a game that rewards knowing what you're doing, rewards familiarity with the game. So if you go in cold, I believe you're going to be at a pretty high disadvantage when you go in. So watch a playthrough or a tutorial or something about it, and go in with a little bit of that research under your belt. And I think that will exponentially increase your odds of doing better in the game instead of just going in, cold and learning it as someone describes it the first time when you're sitting there. So that's my tip for the Game of Thrones board game there. Okay, let's move on. Let's see here. Kabuki talks about BGGcon's plans to move in the future, and we've discussed that a little bit. So I think they are at their current location for at least another year or two, perhaps more. Maybe it was 2018, 2019. Maybe it was another one that was planning to move at 2020. But anyway, yeah, they are going to be at their current location for at least another year, possibly longer. But they are planning to move, definitely. Toyota mentions that a big consideration for cons for me is the amount of folks attending it. Because honestly, 60,000 people is a bit much for me. Yes, that's a very good determining factor. I'm not a huge fan of crowds either. And honestly, when you are in Gen Con, which has 60,000 people, I mean, it's like its own little city in and of itself right there. A nice little board gaming city, but it's amazing how many people can fit into this space. And Gen Con, in addition to BGG, but Gen Con, when they first open the doors to the exhibit hall on that day, maybe even each morning, it is literally, it is like someone just took a city and dumped it out in this hall. It is just this crush of people. And when they, from the other side of things, inside the exhibit hall at Gen Con, sitting at one of the booths, when they open those doors, it is almost literally like a ocean wave of people just comes in and washes over you. It is an amazing thing to see, but it's also a fantastic thing not to be directly in. Lots of times people are in this big, crush in the opening doors because lots of times at Gen Con, some publishers that have the hotter games might have less than 100 copies with them, just due to the turnaround time with printing and stuff. So I can understand the people wanting to grab certain games fast before they are sold out. And with that many people there, they will sell out. But that crush of people at Gen Con that can happen at certain times, it does kind of thin out as time goes by. But that initial crush of people can definitely be a turnoff for some attendees. And like I said, it's something like, if I went to Gen Con not in conjunction with another company and I was just going there on my own, First of all, I'm not sure if I would go to Gen Con just on my own. But if I did, I would probably skip that initial crush of people and just forego getting the hot games and stuff, and probably spend that time, hanging out with others, or just going and sleeping in late that day. Because there's a lot of getting up early and standing in line at Gen Con. So yes, very good point about the 60,000 people, and that having a determination on which conventions you travel to and such. FSZKVF mentions, I am from Costa Rica, Central America. Very cool. Neat. Thanks for joining us. I would love to visit Essen Spiel, but I would probably do several other things in Germany as well. There's another good point about traveling to conventions, is that it doesn't have to be all about the convention itself. And that's one thing in my own personal travels that have helped. I've never been to Essen. Essen, it takes place in Essen, Germany, the Spiel. And I think that Essen is still even bigger than Gen Con. I think Essen is the biggest board gaming trade show in the world. And since it's in Germany, a lot of the American people that I know that travel to it will make more of a vacation out of it. I know a gentleman who this Essen, he and his wife went, and after going to the Essen Spiel, they continued going to seeing some of the sites throughout Europe. They went to London and Paris and stuff like that, and they actually made like a vacation out of it for themselves. And I know that if I ever had the opportunity to go to Essen, my wife has told me that she's going with me because she wants to do a similar thing. And that can apply to other conventions and such. The Dice Tower Con, which takes place in Miami, Florida, we went to that. When I went to that in 2015, we did the family vacation thing out of that. We went to Dice Tower Con, and we also split up our time between Disney World, and we were going to go to SeaWorld, and then the other thing was another company that is escaping my mind, Discovery Cove. We also went to a place called Discovery Cove, which is a really awesome thing to see. So we split up our time among these other things as well during the convention time that we had. So I'm not sure what else there is in Columbus, Ohio for Origins, or Indianapolis, Indiana for Gen Con, but if there are other sites to see at some of these larger conventions, that might also be a reason why another thing that can make it worthwhile to go and travel to those things. And if we have a representative from Columbus, Ohio, or Indianapolis, Indiana in the audience who can tell us what other sites and things there are to see in these wonderful locations, let us know in the comments below, and we'll sure to add that to our list of sites to see when traveling to those locations. In the meantime, let's continue back to our chat area, and let's reload our chat to bring some of these things up. And pop down to where the chat continued. And Germany, Essen. All right. Toyota also mentions that Toyota hasn't gone to a board game convention at all yet. Now, but Toyota, I want to know, does that mean a larger convention, or does that even include like local conventions, game days? Because if you start to look, what I have found, when I got back into the board gaming scene in 2012, I discovered that with just a little bit of effort, I discovered board gaming days and events, and even a little mini convention in my own area that had been going on for a while that I didn't even know about until I knew where to look. Local game stores here have game nights, and I didn't really think about that until I started to go to the game stores. And we have the Eugene Games Gala, or EGG, as it's known as, is a great local convention here where I'm at. And right before, during, or after the Super Bowl weekend, they always have a 3-day convention here locally in town. And this thing has been going on for years, and I didn't discover it until like 2-3 years ago. And it was one of those things where it's, between 60 to, I'd say, 200 people sometimes go to these things. And I just had to know where to look. I had to know my local community to get connected with to find out about it. But it was going on under my nose. And in addition to the 3-day convention, EGG also hosts 3 additional quarterly game days where we rent a hotel ballroom. They rent a hotel ballroom, and they from 9 to midnight on those days, 3 times a year, just gaming all day right there. It's like a little mini convention. So convention does not need to mean, doesn't have to mean going to Origins or Gen Con or Essen and buying plane tickets and stuff like that. There can be substantial conventions that are local to the area if you know which rock to look under sometimes. Just getting connected with the local board gaming community can reveal a lot of these gaming opportunities that we wouldn't be aware of normally. So that can maybe help if you're looking for local gaming events and cons and don't want to travel. That can help as well. Fail Road Express chugs on by to say, we have MaceCon in Charlotte, North Carolina. Have no idea how many attend and didn't have time to make it this year. And it's also in November. Oh, I wasn't aware that Mace is in November. Do you guys in North Carolina believe you also have Scarab? That's another one. I've heard Marty Cannell from Rolling Dice Taking Names, who lives in North Carolina. I've heard him mention Mace and Scarab, but I can never remember how close in proximity those are to each other. But there you go. There's a shout out from MaceCon in Charlotte, North Carolina. Vagrant mentions, I think as the hobby and board game industry grows, the more conventions will also spring up as well. Compare this to the video game industry that has cons like PAX and San Diego Comic-Con, E3, etc. That is a really good point, because I don't know if the board game industry will ever reach the size and scope of the video game industry. It would be awesome if it did, but video games, of course, can be much more accessible because you can play them on your own and you can play them on a mobile device wherever you take it. But it would be nice to see how much potential the board game industry has when compared to like the video game industry. A couple episodes ago, I can't remember which one, but a few episodes ago, I actually compared the numbers for the attendance to Gen Con to the attendance to E3. And more specifically, just the E3 press pool. And I know the E3 press pool alone, just the people that get media badges and are doing interviews and recording footage there for the media, just the portion of the attendees of E3 that have media badges is very close to the size of the entire attendance of Gen Con. I think it's like 50,000 press badges for E3, something like that, and 60,000 for Gen Con. So you can see there, and I think Gen Con gives out a few hundred maybe press badges. It's not a ton. But so if you look at the difference in the sizes of those, it might give an example of the difference in the size of the potential of the board game industry to grow. How large will we get? How big will our industry grow? Well, we'll find out. That's the only thing I can say in about that. Boy, there's a whole other tangent I could get off in there, but I shan't. Instead, I shall continue on to our next comment here. All right. Oh, neat. Wim mentions, I joined Dice Tower Con this summer from Belgium. Wow. Ideally, I would do this every year, but financially, that won't happen. That is cool. I was at Dice Tower Con, and one thing that I like about Dice Tower Con, which takes place around the 4th of July, again, sometimes before, sometimes after. But one thing I like about Dice Tower Con is, even though it's growing to like 3,000 people or so now, this next one, it still has this feel of a small town gaming convention. Gen Con is just a media circus. Origins is kind of the pregame show in a way. It's like a mini Gen Con where people are revealing stuff that's coming up for the year or have some of the early releases. But Origins is like 16,000 people, so it's not as hectic as Gen Con. So it's really nice. But Dice Tower Con doesn't have that circus atmosphere. It really just had the feeling of gamers getting together just to play games and hang out with each other. And so it really was a nice environment. And one thing about Dice Tower Con too is like the first one I went, one of the people I met there, one of the first people I bumped into before the show started was a gentleman who had flown there from London. And there was another person who came there from, I don't know if it was Vietnam. Oh, that's wrong. But somewhere far away. They came all the way over and they traveled there alone, which must have been just a fantastically, nerve-wracking journey to come all the way to another country by yourself for board gaming. But they mentioned that the board gaming environment was so welcoming at Dice Tower Con, it was their pleasure to be there. So fantastic. So Belgium as well, we can add to the list of places that people have traveled from in order to get the Dice Tower Cons. That's just as fascinating to see people traveling from that far to just be in this community and in this environment. So that's excellent. And Wim, I hope that you get to come to another one sometime soon. Pith's Attic cracks open the door to mention, I'm used to cons. I'm used to them as I frequent anime and manga conventions. So board gaming cons just get added to the list right now. For the moment, I still buy more games than play at a con, but that will change in the future, I hope. Hey, and that is an interesting point, how these conventions compare to other conventions. So Pith or anyone else out there in the comments or chat, or if we run out of time, how does a board gaming convention compare to a comic book convention or anime convention? Is it the same type of environment, atmosphere? Is it more of a sales large, like a lot of the comic book conventions I've gone to are just a lot more about finding comics and, getting the autograph of some of the celebrities they have there. It's not really so much a community based. There's people playing Magic and stuff on the side, but board gaming, I guess people have the board games to play. Board gaming seems to be a lot more event driven, it seems. But I guess like Comic-Con and stuff has a lot of panels and events as well. So I've never been to Comic-Con or an anime convention, but I would be curious to see in someone who's been to both a board game one and the others, how do they compare to each other? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to know more about that. Because that might be a topic of a future episode as well. Okay. I need to center myself is what I need to. Hey, how's that? All right, let's continue on to, the jumping chat. Thank you, jumping chat. Oh, well, at least Windows hasn't restarted on me yet. All right, Belgium, Dice Tower Con, Pith. There we go. We're back. Kabuki asks, does the mileage that the ship travels on something like the Dice Tower cruise count as part of travel distance? Good question there. I recall a scientific government study that came to the conclusion that once you arrive at the locale, additional travel is seen more of a statistical anomaly than additional travel expense. So to answer your question, I believe the Bureau for Board Game Travel Analysis came to the conclusion that no, the additional travel of the little boat floating around on water does not count as part of the travel distance. So if you had to calculate that into your own financial planning, rest assured that you don't have to worry about that portion of it. I hope that helps, but somehow I doubt that it does. Let's continue on. Mentions again, a callback to last episode where we were talking about where you buy games and why. And mentions, I got late to the last live show, but I wanted to throw out that I mostly buy games at Amazon, but the tax for them in Costa Rica is 24.5% plus shipping. Is that right? Sorry for the out-of-topic comment. You know what? I don't mind the out-of-topic comment. That's kind of what I expected this show. But it looks like I'm an American, so if it's not written in American, I'm oblivious. It's 24.5%. So I'm assuming that would be the equivalent of 24.5%, which would be 24.5% tax. Wow. Yeah, that's one thing that we take for granted a lot is the shipping. I know that there's a lot of Kickstarters that say they're EU friendly because they have shipping production facilities or something that make shipping expenses less for the EU. But it's the shipping and the tax can often be just as much as the game itself, which obviously can stink. So hopefully that's more of an anomaly, and hopefully there's other ways to obtain some of the games that don't require that much, because that's brutal. All right, Jen joins us. Oh, wow, we have a very international audience today, so that's really cool. Apparently, the American audience is taking advantage of Black Friday and is out at the various locations, probably buying board games for their friends and loved ones, but leaving us with a show with a very international flavor today. It's nice. It's nice to really be able to reach across the various lakes and ponds and share an episode with everyone around the world. I can't remember who I was talking to. Oh, yes, Jen. Okay. Jen mentions, I'm from the UK, so traveling is never too big an issue, but usually try to keep it under 3 hours. The UK Gaming Expo is only about an hour's drive, considering Essen next year as well. Oh yes, the UK Gaming Expo. Haven't been to that, but I have started to hear really, really good things about it. And it's one that's started to be on the radar, the UK Gaming Expo. Can't remember exactly when in the year it is. I know the Dice Tower recently went to it this summer. So probably find something on the Dice Tower's YouTube channel about a video that they took there, which will kind of mention the time that it took place at. But yeah, thank you for mentioning the UK Gaming Expo. And I guess that is one of the nice things about being in the UK is that you can travel to a lot of very diverse locations in a very short amount of time. So that's really cool. So yes, UK Gaming Expo and Essen, both over there. All right, let's continue on. We jumped again. I'm sorry. Let me redo my search. Nope. It helps to search when you spell it correctly. All right, we are... all right, I'm going to answer a question that I'm completely unqualified to answer. So join us now for Chaz Marler's completely unqualified question to answer to a question. Oh, I can't even say it right. There's your level of disqualification. But Fear Anarchy takes the time to scare me with the question, how come Dice Tower shows seem to ignore the Tiny Epics games? No Kickstarter mentions, overviews since Tiny Epics Galaxy, etc. All right, so here's my completely unqualified answer to that is, really? I believe that I've heard the Tiny Epic line mentioned on the Dice Tower audio podcast frequently. No more or less frequently than any other brand. But I would say when it comes to the Kickstarter stuff, I know Suzanne Sheldon does a fantastic, amazing job doing the Kickstarter news each week on the Board Game Breakfast show. So looking for the Kickstarter mentions, that would be your best bet. But I know that Suzanne tries to find stuff that's unique sometimes as well. Kind of big news or unique news in her segments, I believe. So, it's just personal discretion and taste. I would, again, in my completely unqualified opinion, I would say that there's just as many people out there that would say that they do hear about the Tiny Epic Lines games mentioned as those that say that they don't hear them. I think part of it is what people are listening for. So again, I reserve the right to be completely wrong because that was my completely unqualified answer. Thank you, though. It is a good question. If you guys think that there is a brand or a game that gets too much or too little exposure in board game media, let me know that about in the comments below, because that could possibly be a slightly more qualified topic for an upcoming episode. Why do we talk about the games that we do, and which games are we sick of hearing about? That might be an upcoming episode. So thank you, Fear Anarchy, for contributing to the chat with that kind of neat, interesting question. Let's continue with another question from Fail Road Express, who goes back to travel and mentions about the Dice Tower Cruise. I'd love to go to the Dice Tower Cruise. I think I could convince my wife to go with me. That's the way to do it. I brought up the idea, floated the idea of the Dice Tower Cruise with my wife, and her first initial reaction was, I'd love to go on a cruise, like an Alaskan cruise. I was like, well, what about where that one's going to float around? She said, no, I don't want to float around in a nice warm climate like that. I want to go on an Alaskan cruise. We should do that. And so my hint to go on the Dice Tower Cruise turned into trying to figure out now how to make an Alaskan cruise work sometime in the future first. So, success. Yay me. Okay, let's continue on here to the next one. Here's the next comment here with the hashtag. Getting back to the travels of Board Gamery, Toyota mentions that I haven't gone to any board game convention anywhere yet. Oh, there we go. I believe this is a response to a recent question I posed. There was one here recently, but I didn't go because it was promoted badly. Oh, seemed like a Warhammer love fest. Wasn't my scene. Sorry, 40K players. That's another good point. I think I mentioned how a lot of the local conventions, sometimes it takes getting involved in the local community to even find out about them. So promotion of local events seems to be lackluster at best in my experience. So, and lots of times when they are promoted, you get just one person that promotes it with the slant of what their personal interest is. So if you can, Toyota, I would recommend, I'm going to give you homework, find out, I would be curious to know if you did track down some of the people who actually attended it. Was it a Warhammer Love Fest? Or was it just that the person that was promoting it, that was their priority, so they gave it that slant? I'd be curious to know if it actually was just a Warhammer Love Fest or if there was a lot of variety to it. Because a lot of the local conventions, it's true, a lot of them do have a specific game that they're focused around too. So, and that's not bad, but it's just something that an omni gamer or someone that wants to play a certain type of game can sometimes be frustrated by. Okay. Fail Road Express mentions again that there's over 7 game stores in the Charlotte area, wow, and surrounding towns alone. One of my favorites just had to close down because it was in a bad location. 7 game stores in the Charlotte area. Okay, Fail Road, homework for you as well. What I want to know, I've mentioned this a couple years ago when I was talking about the board game bubble, stuff like that. Those 7 game stores, how long have they been in existence? Are they new? Are they 7 game stores that have been there, all of them, for like 20 years? Or are game stores popping up like the plague in your area? Because I saw a similar thing happen with the comic book scene in the early 90s. We went from 2 comic book shops to, I can't even remember, more than half a dozen within the course of a year, and now we're back down to 2. But there was this big explosion, and I wonder if there's a big explosion of board gaming stores. And if there is a big explosion of board gaming stores, is that setting a precedent for history to repeat itself with the board game industry, with what happened with the comic book industry? Anyway, that's a divergence right there. That's a little soapbox detour. So let's hop back into the chat. mentions again that we have PlayCon in Costa Rica, but I've never been to it. But it interests me and probably the fellow Costa Ricans that was watching the show. That is so cool that there's PlayCon. I hope if you get a chance to get to it, I hope two things. One, if you get a chance to go to it, I hope that you share with your experience. What was it like? How many people were there? What kind of games were people playing? It's just always neat to see the culture in other locations and the gaming culture there, to see how things are different, but how the board gaming still brings everyone together for the similar thing. It's always fantastic to see. The other thing is, I'd love to know how to pronounce your avatar name correctly, so I don't butcher it as. So let me know that too if you want. All right, Megan Naxer joins us from the Midwest, I believe. Megan used to be in my local game club here outside of Eugene, but recently had to move for job opportunities. But it's always nice to be able to see you in the chat and say hi to your avatar. Megan mentions, this summer will be my first time attending Origins, my first quote-unquote big convention. I would love to go to BGGcon and or Essen, but teaching schedules really don't work for fall conventions. That's a really good point. I think that's why a lot of them take place over the summer, because a lot of people are on vacation during the summer and have the opportunity. But if you're able to go to Origins, I think Origins is a fantastic one of the larger conventions to be able to go to. I have been fortunate enough to be able to go to Dice Tower Con twice now, Gen Con twice, and Origins once at this point, and BGGcon twice. And out of all of the large conventions, ones that have required, like getting on an airplane to go to and really travel to and be away from home during that time and everything, out of all of the large conventions that I have been to, I believe Origins has become my favorite. Like I said, it's 16,000 people versus 60,000 people at Gen Con. So you have a smaller feel to it. You don't have that crush of people all the time. There's still an extensive exhibitor hall, and it's far enough into the year that some of the new releases are available. If not, there's a lot of information about the upcoming releases available. So you get to either see prototypes or perhaps a couple copies of upcoming games for the year at it. It still has a kind of a nice media feel, it seems, but there is a lot of gaming going on. So you have that mix of media and exhibitors and gaming. But the piece de resistance, though, is that the food at Origins is the best convention food I've ever had. There's the market literally across the street, which is this big, huge mall just full of different food shops. And the food alone was something, just having that not have to be something you had to worry about at the convention made it. So all those things together are why Origins is one. If you have one you're going to start with, I think Origins is a great one to start with. Definitely, in my experience, worth the travel to it because you had a little bit of everything there, and it was still big enough to feel like a convention that was worth traveling to do more than just gaming. So cool, Megan. I hope to see you there at Origins. Fail Road Express follows up on my question about Scarab, mentioning that Scarab is in Ashenville. It's 2 hours away in the North Carolina area in the mountains. Did not know about that one. Oh, well, there you go. All right, I'm going to look for more of the hashtags. Oh, I got to refresh my search. And we are in the last 5-10 minutes of the show, so we're going to enter the lightning round. And once I find where the chat jumped to, 7 stores in Charlotte, 2 hours away. Excellent. I'm going to try and churn through as many questions left as possible in our last 5 to 10 minutes of the show. So here we go, everyone. And we will start with Fail Road Express again. I'm a little bit shocked, but here we go. Someone said that Scarab is in Columbia, South Carolina. I think he's right. Something else is going on in Ashenville. He has a very confusing calendar. Okay, so Scarab might be in a different location than Fail Road Express, and by extension, I said. So don't hold either of us to it. Consult your local Google to find out more about Scarab and its location today. All right, moving on. TJ Sulcer mentions from being outside of the U.S., yes, sometimes we pay more on taxes than the games cost themselves. And that's a pity. It's a shame. But I'm glad that there is still the ability to obtain some games instead of being totally shut out, because that would stink even more. Jakers mentions Chaz. Shout out from Northern Ireland. Woo! International Flavor Day. A group of us will be going to the UK Gaming Expo for the first time in 2017. That is awesome. And let me know how it goes, because that's the UK Gaming Expo is one I kind of have my eye on, because I hear a lot of good things about it, and I hope that it is good. Fail Road also mentions, I bought a few games from the store that was going out of business, the one that of the 7 that recently went out, and everything was 30% off. And I got Quadropolis, Kittens in a Blender, and Starflux. That is cool. I was going to talk about stores that go out of business, and but I don't think we're at that point with the industry where there's that sort of churn, and is also kind of a bittersweet way to obtain some games. So I'm just going to move on and not embarrass myself further, unless, of course, my head explodes. That would be very embarrassing. But I doubt that'll happen again. All right, Himaran mentions, talking about taxes. I have to pay here, the games, plus taxes, 21%, plus customs paperwork, which is $13.74, and VAT, which I believe is value added tax, if there is any. Plus shipping to the Canary Islands, which can get pretty serious even inside my own country of Spain. Wow, that is just insane. And that's it's a shame that that there's not more distribution options available to prevent that level of taxation from happening. But hopefully, if the industry continues to grow, hopefully more options will become available to everyone as well. Okay. Here we go. Sren mentions that BGG is doing an Alaska cruise in 2018. Thank you for emptying my wallet, Sren. My wife will appreciate that. But that's good to know. I did not know that. Toyota mentions homework done. I gave Toyota homework, and he says his homework is done. Nope. He says it just had some variety, but the amount of people that attended was only in the hundreds and not many vendors. There were like 20 fewer vendors. So mid-BC in Canada. So there you go. Thank you, Toyota, for already providing the follow-up information about the con that I was curious about. That is service right there. Speaking of service, I'm going to try and churn through the rest of these comments and questions. Fail Road Express mentions that they have at least 2 or 3 new stores have opened this year alone. Wow, 2 or 3 new game stores have opened in Fail Road's North Carolina area this year alone. Some have been open for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure about all of them. 2 or 3 new game stores opening in the last year. That's, in my experience, seems like a lot. And I'm curious how the customer base, if it's large enough to support that, because that seems like a very large amount of growth. Interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Hey, Srin mentions MIPACon is the Northeast Pennsylvania con twice a year. Thank you for providing that info. Svisk mentions 7 game stores, probably in response to Fail Road Express. Yeah, 7 game stores. We have 2. Again, Fisk is in Costa Rica. We have 2 that I know about here in Costa Rica, and they specialize on Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, and so on. So there's very few board games actually at them. Interesting. Also, yes, it was 24.5%. Fran, and you could pronounce it as Fran if you want. Excellent, Fisk. I'll start pronouncing it Fran. Thank you for the tip. And I hope to get a chance to pronounce it in future episodes. Because right now, we are almost out of time, but I'm going to cheat because I see 4 more that are short. Kabuki mentions, what is the volume of the Caspian Sea? Stop it. You're not going to get me to stop and go look that up. So play nice, Kabuki Kid. And Mechanic Joe mentions, is there going to be an awesome Battling Tops video this year? I did get some Battling Tops footage, and actually after I finish this episode, later this afternoon, one of the things on my list is to go and try and finish my Battling Tops video. Its level of awesomeness, though, is up in the air. We'll have to let the viewers decide on that. And Brandon mentions, do you bring an extra suitcase to conventions? Oh, that's a... no, I personally don't, because I try to have no luggage to check. I try to keep everything as small as possible so I can have carry-on luggage only, so I don't have to wait in the airports at the little tourney style things for my luggage to come off. But I do know more than one person, probably more than 5, that will pack a suitcase within a suitcase when they go to a gaming convention, and then they will just fill one of their suitcases with games and use that as checked luggage on the way back to save on shipping fees. So that is not an uncommon practice. And we're going to end with Kabuki. No, we're going to almost end with Kabuki, who asks, why do flamingos turn white when held in captivity? That I do know, because flamingos turn pink because of the diet that they eat. It's the krill or shrimp or something. Whatever their diet is in the wild is what turns them pink. So that is why when held in captivity, they no longer eat that same diet and they turn white. So Kabuki Kid, got ya. I knew that one. And to further put some salt in the old funny question wound there, we're going to turn to our helper, Swen, who mentions that there are 16,650 cubic miles of water in the Caspian Sea. So, take that. Double whammy, Kabuki. Woo! Unstoppable team metagame. All right. So on those consecutive wins at Kabuki Kid's expense, we're going to wrap up this episode right here. And hey, I want to thank everyone who stuck around through the initial lag problems that we have. I apologize for that. I'm not sure what caused that. But also everyone else that took time out of their day today to spend an hour with myself and everyone else in the chat. I always appreciate all of the participation. I had no idea how much participation to expect today, but it blew away my expectations, and I'm really appreciative of that. And so, until next time, I have been Chaz Marler, your host for the Metagame, and I will talk to you all again soon. And until we do, be sure, as always, to stop by the Dice Tower and Pair Dice YouTube channels for more board game news, reviews, and commentary. And join us on Facebook and Twitter as well to continue the conversation. Until our next conversation, do those things. I'll talk to you again soon.
So much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.